Imagine for a moment the faces of those who once stood and watched your heart shatter. They didn't lift a hand to help you. Some even smiled as you fell. They whispered that you'd never rise again. They said your story was over. You remember the nights when their silence hurt more than their words, and the days when your prayers seemed to echo back unanswered. But what they didn't know was that God was still listening. While they saw a person breaking, God saw a foundation being rebuilt. Every tear you cried was counted. Every lonely night was recorded. Every quiet act of faith, when you still chose to trust God though you couldn't see the way, none of it was wasted. You see, the breaking was not your ending, it was your preparation. God was never trying to destroy you. He was refining you. He was removing the people, the pride, and the pain that couldn't walk with you into the next chapter of your destiny. Those who mocked your downfall saw the pain, but not the process. They witnessed your weakness, but not your warfare. They saw you stumble, but not the strength it took to stand again. And now, as God begins to lift you, those same eyes that once looked down on you will be forced to look up to see you. For when God restores, He does not return you to where you were. He raises you higher than where you fell. Have you ever noticed that God often performs His greatest miracles in the presence of those who doubted Him? He could have raised Lazarus alone in the tomb, but He waited until the mourners gathered. He could have rescued Joseph quietly from the pit, but He allowed him to rise in Egypt's palace, where his brothers could see the crown on his head. God doesn't just redeem your pain. He redeems the story in front of your enemies. This is the mystery of divine justice. God doesn't avenge through anger. He restores through revelation. He allows your elevation to become a living testimony that silences every false word spoken against you. You won't need to defend yourself, explain your worth, or prove your faith. Your blessing will do it for you. Those who watched you break will not recognize the person you're becoming, because when God rebuilds you, He doesn't just repair what's broken, He redefines it. The scars they mocked will shine as proof that you survived what was meant to destroy you. The weakness they laughed at will now be the very strength that carries you into greatness. And here's the beauty of God's work. He doesn't bless you to humiliate others. He blesses you to reveal His glory. The same people who mocked you will become witnesses of mercy, not victims of envy. They will have no choice but to admit that it was only God who could have brought you this far. For every insult they threw, God will give you an increase. For every rejection you faced, He will grant you recognition. For every door they slammed shut, He will open one so wide that everyone will see it was meant only for you. So, if you're in a season of silence, don't mistake it for God's absence. He's building something behind the scenes that will soon speak for itself. Your restoration won't be hidden. It will be public, undeniable, and divine. Those who thought you were finished will witness your resurrection. Those who used your pain as gossip will soon use your story as inspiration. When God blesses you, He will make sure the right eyes see it, not because you need validation, but because He wants the world to know He was there all along. Every wound had a purpose, every betrayal had a reason, and every fall was only a setup for a greater rise. So hold your peace. Stop explaining yourself. Stop proving your worth to those who never saw it. Let your silence speak, because God's about to do something that words can't describe. The same people who watched you break will watch you shine. The same mouths that doubted you will declare, "Surely the hand of God was upon them." Your story isn't over. It's being rewritten by the author of grace Himself. And this next chapter will leave everyone in awe of what God can do with a broken heart that refused to give up. When your world began to fall apart, it felt like chaos. It felt cruel, unfair, and senseless. You prayed for mercy, and instead, life broke you in places you thought would never heal. But the truth is, God was not punishing you. He was preparing you. The breaking was never meant to end you. It was meant to transform you. There are seasons in life where the only way God can build something greater in you is to allow everything temporary to collapse. He cannot place divine purpose on a foundation built by human approval, so he removes it, piece by piece, until only faith remains. You may not have realized it then, but every painful moment was a sacred moment. Every tear that rolled down your face was seen by the eyes of heaven. God was not distant. He was right there, watching over you like a potter watches the clay as it spins in the fire. The clay doesn't understand the process. It feels the pressure, the spinning, the heat, and it fears it will crack. But the potter knows exactly how much pressure to apply and how much heat to allow. The vessel must endure the breaking before it can hold the glory. That's what was happening to you. God was reshaping your soul for what he was preparing to pour into it. Sometimes we pray for elevation without realizing that elevation requires separation. God cannot take everyone with you to the next level. He cannot allow certain people or attachments to travel where he's taking you. So he permits the breaking, not because he wants to see you cry, but because he wants to free you from what would have kept you small. You thought you lost support, but what you lost was a ceiling. You thought you were falling apart, but what was falling apart was your limitation. The people who watched you break couldn't understand what God was doing in you. They thought your struggle was evidence of failure, not realizing it was evidence of divine preparation. When God is about to bless someone beyond measure, he often hides them in pain. He allows their worth to be underestimated so that no one can claim credit when the miracle comes. That's why you were broken publicly, but restored privately. That's why your cries were heard only by heaven. You were being set apart, not set aside. Think of Joseph. His brothers watched him suffer in the pit, and they thought that was the end of his story, but God was writing something no one could erase. The same brothers who laughed at his pain had to bow before his promotion. That's what divine reversal looks like. What they thought was your burial was actually your planting. The soil of suffering is where God grows the roots of greatness. The breaking strips you of everything false. The need to please people, the fear of rejection, the dependence on external validation. In the silence of your pain, you learn to depend on God alone. And that's where true power is born, because when God becomes your source, no loss can destroy you. You no longer fear what people take from you, because you know they cannot take what God has for you. So when you look back at your breaking, don't see it as a curse, see it as a divine classroom. God was teaching you what strength really means. You learned how to pray when no one was listening. You learned how to walk when the ground beneath you crumbled. You learned how to keep going when every reason told you to stop. And in that breaking, your spirit was refined into something unshakable. Now, when God begins to bless you, the people who once pitied you will stand in awe. They'll wonder how you survived what should have destroyed you. They'll whisper, how did they come back stronger than before? And the answer will be simple, because God was the one holding you when everything else let go. The same people who watched you break will watch the blessing they thought would never come, and when they see it, they'll realize it wasn't luck, it wasn't timing, and it wasn't coincidence. It was divine orchestration. Your breaking was the construction site for your blessing. The fire you endured was the proof that you were chosen to carry something extraordinary. So don't hide your scars. They're sacred symbols of what God can do when he allows a soul to break just enough to rebuild it with his glory. When people saw you fall, they thought your story had ended. They whispered among themselves, saying, "Where is their God now?" They mistook your silence for defeat and your tears for weakness. But God heard every word. He saw every smirk, every mocking glance, every careless comment spoken over your pain. And he made a promise in his own way. I will be their defender. There comes a time when God doesn't need you to explain yourself to anyone. He doesn't need you to fight back, argue, or try to clear your name. He simply says, stand still and you will see my salvation. Because he knows that his justice speaks louder than any voice that rose against you. The same people who once spoke your name in ridicule will one day have to speak it with respect. Not because you demanded it, but because God Himself placed His glory upon your life. God never wastes pain. He doesn't allow humiliation without preparing vindication. He doesn't let the world watch your breaking without planning a public display of restoration. Just as the night gives way to the dawn, your season of ridicule is destined to make way for a season of recognition. There's a deep divine poetry in how God works. He doesn't humiliate your enemies. He humbles them through your elevation. Think of Hannah. She was mocked by those who saw her as barren. They taunted her because her womb was closed, but when God remembered her, the laughter of her mockers turned into silence. She named her son Samuel, saying, "Because I asked the Lord for him." That's what divine evidence looks like. The kind of blessing that silences every critic. The same people who questioned your faith will have no words left when they see the fruit of it. When God blesses you, He doesn't do it in a hidden corner. He brings your restoration into the light for all to witness. He does it not to boast, but to testify. Your breakthrough becomes His message. Your healing becomes His signature. Your success becomes His sermon. God's favor on your life becomes undeniable proof that He was with you all along, even when others turned away. You see, those who mocked your fall did not understand that you were in a divine classroom. You were learning humility, patience, and trust. You were learning how to stand without applause, how to love without being loved back, and how to hope without evidence. And when the time comes, God rewards that secret strength. He blesses you in such a way that no one can deny His hand upon your life. When the same eyes that saw your failure witness your favor, it will pierce their hearts in silence, because they will realize that what they mocked was not your weakness, it was your testing ground. You were being prepared in pain for a platform only grace could build. They thought you were finished, but God was just forming your testimony. Don't waste your breath trying to prove yourself to people. Don't lower yourself to explain what only God can reveal. Stay silent, because silence is the language of trust. When you trust God enough to let Him speak for you, He will craft a story that no voice of doubt can undo. He will lift you so gracefully that even your enemies will have to admit it was not by might nor by power, but by His Spirit. Sometimes God allows you to be underestimated, so that when He raises you, it's clear that it was His doing. He lets them laugh, not because He delights in your humiliation, but because He's setting the stage for their realization. Their laughter becomes the background music to your breakthrough, and when the blessing arrives, their words will fail them. The same mouths that spoke judgment will now whisper in wonder. You are about to become living evidence that God vindicates His own. You won't need revenge, you'll have results. You won't need to curse anyone. Your blessing will be the loudest response. Because when God decides to honor you, He does it so magnificently that every tongue that rose against you has to bow before His work. So be still and hold your peace. Let the world talk. God is preparing your proof. And when that proof arrives, it won't just be seen, it will be undeniable. The same people who watched you break will be left speechless as they watch God bless you. They will see grace where there once was grief, laughter where there once were tears, and strength where there once was sorrow. Your vindication is not coming from man, it's coming from God Himself. And when He moves, no one can stop Him. Every mocker will become a witness, every critic will become a spectator, and every doubter will see that the God who watched you cry is the same God who now crowns you with joy. There are wounds the world never saw, pain you carried so deeply that even words could not describe it. You smiled through heartbreak, worked through exhaustion, and prayed through silence. People saw fragments of your struggle, but only God saw the full story. He saw the moments you broke down after pretending to be strong. He saw how you forgave people who didn't deserve it. He saw how you chose faith when it would have been easier to quit. That's why your pain is not wasted. It's being transformed into divine purpose. When God allows you to walk through pain, it's never random. Pain is a messenger, a tool, a holy teacher that prepares the heart for a higher calling. The seasons that nearly destroyed you are the very seasons that will define your destiny. What felt like abandonment was actually alignment. God was aligning your heart with His purpose, training you through the very things you prayed to escape. He used disappointment to detach you from what couldn't go with you. He used loneliness to teach you to walk with Him instead of relying on others. Every scar you carry tells a sacred story. You survived what others didn't think you would, and now those scars are not symbols of weakness. They're signatures of God's faithfulness. They're proof that He can turn even the ugliest battles into beauty. God never wastes suffering. He recycles it into strength. He takes what was meant to destroy you and turns it into something that will deliver others. That's how divine purpose is born, not in comfort, but in crucifixion. Think about Joseph again. His pain began in betrayal, thrown into a pit by his own brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused and forgotten in prison. Yet every painful step was a bridge leading to purpose. What started as heartbreak ended in honor. What began as rejection ended in restoration. When he finally stood as ruler of Egypt, he said something profound. You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. Those are the words of someone who has seen pain redeemed. Those are the words of someone who realizes that nothing is wasted in the hands of God. Your story is walking that same pattern. The places where you bled will one day become the places where others find healing through you. The nights that broke you will become the reason someone else learns not to give up. You went through what you went through so you could speak from a place of truth. That's why your pain was private, because your purpose will be public. God didn't want your preparation to be seen. He wanted your transformation to be undeniable. There's something holy about hidden seasons. It's in the hiding that God shapes your heart. It's in the quiet that He rewrites your story. The same isolation that made you feel forgotten was the space where heaven was preparing your unveiling. You were never alone. You were being refined. You were being emptied so God could fill you with something eternal, compassion, wisdom, and strength that no comfort could ever teach. One day you'll understand why it had to hurt the way it did, because what you're becoming could not have been built on comfort. You had to be broken to be rebuilt correctly. You had to lose what was unstable to find what was unshakable. You had to be emptied to be entrusted with more. And when the blessing comes, it won't just satisfy you. It will serve others. That's the beauty of divine transformation. Your pain becomes a platform, your scars become sermons, and your wounds become weapons against darkness. The same people who saw you cry will see you comfort others. They'll witness how the very thing that broke you birthed something greater in you. That's how God silences shame. He turns it into strength. He lets the world see that even broken pieces can shine when placed in divine hands. So never despise your pain. Don't rush to escape it. Learn from it. It's the birthplace of your purpose. God is molding you into someone who can handle the blessing that's coming. Because when He blesses you, it won't be small. It will be so radiant, so overflowing, that it will reach others, and they'll know that your glow came from grace, not from ease. You see, God doesn't just restore, He redeems. Redemption means He takes the very thing that once caused your tears and makes it the reason for someone else's hope. That's how He works. He turns graves into gardens, mourning into dancing, pain into purpose. The same pain that broke you will one day speak healing into someone else's life. And when that day comes, you'll look back and realize God was never punishing you. He was positioning you. You weren't being destroyed. You were being designed. And the people who watched you break will finally see that every heartbreak was heaven's blueprint for the blessing you now carry. There comes a point in every believer's journey when God allows people to walk away, not because you did something wrong, but because He needed to show you who was truly for you. You begged some to stay. You tried to explain yourself. You thought if they just understood your heart, they would see your worth. But they didn't. They left when you needed them most, and their absence cut deeper than any sword. You stood in the ruins of friendship, family, or love, wondering why loyalty turned to silence. But what you didn't see then was that their departure was divine direction. Again and again, a father who protected his woes was deceptive in his direction. God sometimes clears the stage before the miracle. He removes those who cannot handle your next chapter, not to punish you, but to protect the promise He placed on your life. Some people were never meant to witness your blessing because their hearts were not pure enough to handle it. They could celebrate you as long as you were beneath them, but the moment God began to raise you, their love turned into jealousy. So He removed them quietly before they could sabotage your future. It hurts when people leave while you're breaking. You expected compassion, but you got criticism. You needed prayer, but you received distance. You looked for understanding, but they looked away. Yet in that painful abandonment, heaven was rewriting your story. God never leaves an empty space without the intention to fill it with something better. He took them out not to leave you lonely, but to make room for His presence to be your companion. Remember, when Joseph was thrown into the pit by his brothers, they walked away thinking they had buried him. They didn't realize they had planted him. God used their betrayal to position Joseph for honor. Years later, when famine struck the land, those same brothers who sold him into slavery stood before him, not recognizing that the one they wounded was now the one God had raised to save them. That's what divine reversal looks like. The same people who abandon you will one day stand in awe of the grace that carried you. Your story is walking the same path. The ones who turned their backs when you were crying will one day see you standing in strength they can't explain. God will make sure they witness your comeback, not out of vengeance, but revelation. He wants them to see what His mercy looks like on a life they once dismissed. You won't need to say a word. Your elevation will speak for itself. The tables will turn so naturally that those who left you will realize it was never you who lost them. It was them who lost the opportunity to walk beside what God was creating. There's a holy silence in the way God restores. He doesn't rush. He doesn't announce it. He builds you in the shadows, in the quiet, where no one can interfere. Then, at the appointed time, He reveals you. Healed, whole, unrecognizable. The same voices that said, "They'll never recover," will whisper, "How did they rise so high?" And the answer will echo through your peace. God did it. God's restoration is poetic. He doesn't just give back what you lost. He multiplies it in the sight of those who doubted you. He heals your heart and crowns you with dignity. He replaces your shame with strength and your loneliness with purpose. Every betrayal becomes a stepping stone. Every abandonment becomes a doorway to destiny. And when He brings you into that new place, you won't carry bitterness. You'll carry wisdom. You'll look at those who left and realize they were never capable of staying, because where God is taking you requires a different level of loyalty. So, if you're standing in a season where people have walked away, don't chase them. Let them go. Because the same God who allowed their exit is preparing your entrance. And when He opens that new door, you'll understand why it had to happen this way. The rejection that once broke you will be the very reason you stand stronger. The silence that once wounded you will become the sound of peace within you. And the loneliness that once made you question your worth will become the space where you finally hear God's voice clearly. When the time comes, those who left will see what they walked away from. They'll see how God took your emptiness and turned it into abundance. They'll see how He clothed your pain in purpose and your sorrow in strength. And they'll realize that while they abandoned you, heaven was embracing you. Your restoration will not be quiet. It will be radiant, undeniable, and divine. God will restore you publicly to prove that every private tear was worth it. Those who left you will not recognize the person God has raised from the ashes. They'll see grace on your life and know they were wrong to walk away. But by then you won't need their validation, because the only hand you'll see on your rise will be God's. So, lift your head and let peace settle in your heart. You haven't been forgotten. You've been hidden for a reason. God is preparing to restore you in such a way that the same people who watched you break will be left in awe, whispering among themselves, "Only God could have done this." Every tear you cried in the dark carried meaning, even when you thought heaven was silent. Not a single drop went unnoticed. God collected every one, not as a reminder of your pain, but as a promise of your purpose. He saw the nights when your heart was too heavy for words, when prayer felt like breathing through fire, when you questioned if He still remembered your name. You thought you were breaking, but you were being written into something sacred, because one day, those tears will no longer represent suffering. They will represent strength. They will be the evidence that you endured what others could not, and became the proof that God heals the broken-hearted. Pain is never wasted in the hands of God. It becomes the ink with which He writes redemption. The tears you shed will become the very testimony that breathes hope into others who are now walking the same path you once did. You see, there are people who will survive because of your story. They'll hear how you were shattered and yet still found faith, and something inside them will awaken. They'll say, if God could lift them, maybe He can lift me too. That's how divine purpose works. Your pain becomes a bridge that leads others to their own healing. You may not have realized it then, but those tears were watering the soil of your future blessing. Every cry was a seed, every ache a prayer, and every heartbreak a preparation. God was not ignoring you. He was transforming you. He was softening your heart, deepening your empathy, and preparing you to carry compassion like a crown. The same tears that once blurred your vision will one day help you see life through the eyes of grace. Think of David. He cried out in caves, running from people who should have protected him. He wept until there were no tears left, yet every drop that fell became a part of his psalms. The same words that now comfort millions, his tears became songs, and his pain became prophecy. That is the power of divine transformation. What once felt like torment becomes testimony. Your tears are sacred. They carry the fragrance of sincerity that heaven honors. The world may dismiss them, but God does not. He bottles them, records them, and then redeems them. There will come a time when the same emotions that once brought you to your knees will be the reason you stand tall. You'll speak peace into someone else's storm, not because you read it in a book, but because you survived it yourself. And when that moment arrives, you'll understand why the pain had to last as long as it did. You'll realize that God wasn't late. He was perfecting the message inside of you. Some lessons can only be learned through tears. Some strength can only be built in silence. Some testimonies can only be written in seasons of suffering. The beauty of your story will not come from what you avoided, but from what you overcame. Those who once pitied you will soon admire your resilience. They will see peace where there once was pain, laughter where there once was loss. And they'll ask, how did you heal from that? You'll smile, not in pride, but in gratitude, and say, because God never left. That sentence alone will carry the power to restore faith in those who lost theirs. When God blesses you, He doesn't just give you material things. He gives you a message. He turns your tears into testimonies that touch lives beyond your own. That's why you had to go through it with integrity. That's why He asked you to keep believing even when it hurt. Because now your story carries an authority that only endurance can create. You'll speak, and hearts will listen, because you've walked the road they're still on. And isn't that what true victory looks like? Not just to survive pain, but to turn it into purpose. Not just to receive healing, but to become a vessel of healing for others. When God restores you, He doesn't erase your past. He redeems it. He makes your tears the proof that nothing is too broken for His touch. So the next time you remember those nights when you wept alone, don't feel ashamed. Feel grateful. Because what once felt like the end of your faith was actually the beginning of your ministry. You are living proof that God turns pain into purpose, sorrow into strength, and tears into triumph. One day you'll look back and realize that the very tears that fell in weakness became the water that helped something divine grow inside you. Your pain gave birth to empathy, your heartbreak created wisdom, and your endurance inspired faith. That is how God works. He does not waste a single tear. He transforms them into testimony until the same people who watched you break will now watch you bless others with the story of how God rebuilt you. There is a sacred mystery in the way God works. He doesn't always take you to a new place to bless you. Sometimes He returns you to the same place where you were once broken, not to hurt you again, but to honor you there. The ground where you once cried will become the ground where you will rejoice. The same streets where you were mocked will echo with your laughter. The very people who watched you struggle will watch you shine, because God doesn't erase the scene of your pain. He redeems it. When you walked through that season of suffering, it felt like the place itself rejected you. Every corner held a memory, every face reminded you of failure, every word spoken there seemed to carry a sting. You wanted to escape it, to never look back. But God, in His divine wisdom, often brings us full circle, not to remind us of defeat, but to display His victory. He turns your place of shame into your platform of glory. He lets the same witnesses who saw your fall witness your rise, so they'll know the difference between human effort and divine favor. Consider the story of Job. His friends and neighbors watched him lose everything: his wealth, his health, his family, his dignity. They judged him, whispered about him, and assumed his suffering was punishment. But when God restored him, He didn't do it in a distant land. He restored Job right where he had been disgraced. In the same community that once pitied him, he was blessed with double. Those who gossiped about his fall now had to gather and witness his restoration. That is how God works. He doesn't just lift you up, He lifts you where everyone can see that it was His hand that did it. Sometimes we think restoration means escape, a new city, a new environment, a new life far away from the pain. But God's kind of restoration is more powerful. He makes the desert bloom again. He rebuilds what was torn down. He turns ashes into beauty in the same place where the fire once burned. Because if He only moved you, people would assume your blessing came from a change of circumstance. But when He blesses you in the same place where you were broken, everyone will know it was the Lord. You may not realize it yet, but the place where you were wounded holds the soil for your greatest growth. It's the same place where your faith was tested, where your prayers were born, where you learned to depend on nothing but God. That ground is holy, not because of what happened to you, but because of what God did in you while you were there. And when He blesses you there, it becomes a memorial, proof that the God who allows pain also perfects purpose. The people who watched you fall will be speechless. They won't be able to understand how the same ground that buried you now blesses you. They'll see you walking through the same doors that once shut in your face, sitting in the same rooms where you once felt invisible, smiling in the same places where you once cried, but this time you'll walk in with peace instead of pain, confidence instead of confusion, favor instead of fear. And here's what makes God's restoration so profound. He doesn't just fix what was broken. He builds something better from it. When He returns you to the same place, it's not so you can relive the hurt. It's so you can rewrite the story. You won't look at that place the same way anymore. You'll stand in it and feel gratitude instead of grief. Because now, every scar has a purpose, every memory has a message, and every loss has led you here, to the place where God turns pain into praise. You see, true victory isn't escaping your past. It's being able to stand where you once fell and say, I'm still here, and God is good. That's the kind of victory that silences every doubter. That's the kind of blessing that no one can deny. God will make sure the people who watched you break will stand in awe as He blesses you in the very place where they thought your story ended. So, when you find yourself walking through familiar places that once brought tears to your eyes, don't fear. You're not the same person who once suffered there. You've been strengthened, refined, and anointed for this moment. What once felt like a battlefield will soon feel like holy ground, because that's where God will crown you. And when He does, you'll realize it was never about revenge or proving anyone wrong. It was about revelation. God wanted everyone, including you, to see that His grace is greater than any pain, and His restoration is stronger than any betrayal. The same place that broke you will become the very platform where God displays His power through you. Stand tall then. Walk with peace. Return to that place not with bitterness, but with blessing in your hands, because the God who watched you cry there is the same God who will make you rejoice there. The same people who saw you break will see His glory all over you, and they'll have no choice but to whisper, "Truly, the Lord has done great things for them." There was a time when you longed to be understood. You tried to explain your heart to people who never cared to listen. You tried to defend your intentions when false stories were told about you. You exhausted yourself trying to prove that your love was pure, your motives were right, your faith was real. Yet no matter how much you explained, they chose to believe the lie. And so you stopped speaking. You withdrew not out of weakness but out of wisdom. You realized that when people are committed to misunderstanding you, no amount of truth will change their perception. That silence was not your surrender, it was your surrender to God. And that's when everything began to change. Because God fights most fiercely for those who no longer fight to be seen. When you step back and allow Him to take the stage, He writes a story that no critic can rewrite. You see, human honor fades quickly. One day they praise you, the next day they question you. But when God honors a person, the recognition carries eternity's weight. He doesn't need an audience to validate His chosen ones. He simply lifts them until their light speaks louder than any accusation ever could. This is the mystery of divine justice. God never asks you to defend yourself. He asks you to trust Him. He allows lies to be told so that truth can later shine more brightly. He permits your name to be dragged through the dirt because He plans to raise it higher than those who buried it. The very words spoken to destroy your reputation will one day serve as the backdrop for your vindication. The same mouths that curse you will be silenced by the blessing they cannot deny. When God honors you, He doesn't just bless you quietly. He establishes your name in such a way that it carries peace, influence, and credibility. Not the kind the world gives, but the kind heaven confirms. He does it so gracefully that you won't need to shout, "Look at me now." Instead, people will look at your life and whisper, "Surely the hand of God was upon them." That's the beauty of divine vindication. It doesn't need a defense. It just is. Think about Esther. She didn't campaign for the crown. She didn't beg for favor. She simply positioned her heart in humility and obedience. When the time came, God's favor found her. The same palace where she was once unknown became the place where she was honored. She didn't demand attention. God gave it. She didn't force respect. God ordained it. That's how divine honor works. It's not earned through striving. It's given through surrender. You might have been overlooked, misunderstood, and underestimated for years, but God has been keeping a record. He saw the times you held your tongue when you could have fought back. He saw how you responded with grace when others attacked you. He saw how you kept praying when you could have turned bitter. And He made note of it all, every moment of restraint, every act of faith, every choice to stay kind when cruelty was easier. You didn't lose those moments. You were sowing seeds of honor. And soon the harvest will come. God will lift you in such a way that no man can take the credit. You won't need to chase acknowledgement or beg for validation. It will come naturally, divinely, and undeniably. People who once questioned you will have no choice but to respect you, not because you forced them to, but because God made it so. He will place a glow upon your life that cannot be denied, a peace that cannot be faked, and a dignity that no one can diminish. When that moment comes, you won't even feel the need to say, "I told you so," because the pain of the past will no longer matter. The peace of the present will. God's blessing will be enough. The tables will have turned, not through revenge, but through righteousness. Your life itself will be your testimony. The same people who once doubted your faith will come to you for prayer. The ones who whispered your downfall will ask for your advice. That is what divine honor looks like. It humbles the proud and exalts the faithful. So, don't chase recognition. Don't try to prove your worth to those who refuse to see it. Your silence is not weakness, it's strategy. Let God do what only He can do, because when He honors you, it will be in such a way that no explanation is needed. Your peace will speak, your joy will testify, your blessing will proclaim, louder than any voice on earth, that you were chosen, refined, and lifted by God Himself. The same people who watched you break will stand in awe of how gracefully God rebuilt you. And while they search for words, you'll simply smile, not in pride, but in gratitude, because the victory was never about proving them wrong. It was about proving that God was right about you all along. You've walked through fire and rain, through betrayal and silence, through nights so long you forgot what morning felt like. You were broken in full view of those who never thought you'd rise again. Yet here you stand, not because of luck, not because of strength, but because grace refused to let you stay fallen. What once looked like your ending was simply the part of your story where heaven picked up the pen. The same people who watched you break will watch God bless you, not as a display of pride, but as a revelation of power. They will see that every season of loss was secretly preparing you for overflow. They will see that the hands that once trembled in sorrow are now lifted in praise. And in that moment, they'll realize that no human plan, no cruel word, no rejection, and no betrayal could cancel what God ordained. You see, divine restoration is never quiet. It arrives like dawn after a long, cold night, slowly, steadily, and undeniably. One day the light breaks through, and the darkness that once surrounded you becomes a distant memory. God doesn't restore you to where you were, He elevates you to where you were always meant to be. The ashes become beauty, the tears become testimony, and the pain becomes purpose. Everything that fell apart was part of the plan. Every heartbreak taught you to lean on Him. Every delay trained you to trust His timing. Every closed door was redirecting you towards something far greater. And now the chapter of weeping is closing, and the chapter of glory is beginning. Those who doubted your endurance will witness your elevation. Those who misjudged your silence will watch your peace speak louder than words. When God honors you, He does it in a way that heals the heart and humbles the soul. You'll stand in blessings you didn't chase, surrounded by peace you didn't earn, filled with joy you thought you'd lost forever. And you'll know it was never your doing. It was all Him. Every scar, every tear, every unanswered question now finds its meaning in His plan. So hold your head high. You are not forgotten. You are favored. You are not broken. You are being built. You are not behind. You are right on schedule for what heaven has prepared. The same eyes that watched you suffer will soon witness your strength. The same voices that mocked your fall will whisper in awe at your rise. And when they do, you won't need to say a word. Your life will speak for you, because in the end the glory will not be yours. It will belong to the one who carried you through the valley, who never left your side, who turned your breaking into blessing and your pain into praise. And as the world looks upon your restoration, they will see the truth that was written over your life from the very beginning. No weapon formed against you shall prosper, and every tongue that rose against you shall fall silent. Your story isn't over. It's unfolding into something breathtaking. And the same people who watched you break will watch in awe as God blesses you beyond measure